Okay, good evening. I'm not sure who's here. In the group chat, if you are here, it would be nice to just say, check in with your name, or just say you can hear me. If you're on the group chat, anyone can see the group chat, or you're welcome to just see here these tools, control room, sharing. In sharing, okay. Let's see how we go here. It's going to look a little bit grainy. Not viewers live. Okay, how do I stop that broadcast? Not viewers links. View. Okay, let's see, control room. We've got 8 viewers. All right, so a couple of people on, and we're starting. I'm just going to wait a few minutes. I see people are coming on now. 9 viewers. If you can enter into something into the chat room, just check in on the chat room and say hi, just so I know that you're here and you can hear me. Q&A. Let's see, you're presenting to everyone. I'll come up with that in a minute. I'm just going to take a minute or two to let others join. Probably start at about 25 to. There's 10 people on. If you have any questions, you can enter them. You should be able to see that or ask a question. There's a little Q&A block on the left-hand side of your screen. So you should be able to use that. I know the video feed, biggest, my large 3 plus. YouTube when they join. Yeah, that I see audience and hide the other video feeds. Yep. Join, hide the audience video from my broadcast. Okay. All right, we got 12 viewers on. Let's see what else we can do here. All right, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to just ask them in the Q&A block. I can't hear anybody. And I'm presuming that FaceTime camera default, built-in microphone, built-in output. Okay, that seems to be fine. 16 viewers, it's about the number of people that responded, so I think we're just about there, and then we'll start. Custom overlay, volume control, can't do that. Comment tracker, don't remember this last time. Right, my challenge is to get yourselves to be able to ask a question. So you've got to figure out how to do that. I have a Q&A window, which is a group chat, but I'm not sure if you can see that Q&A window. I need to get some sort of response from you before I carry on, just so that I know that you can hear what I'm saying. So if somebody could figure that out and send me a chat message or ask me a question, either one of those would be great. We've got 22 people on now. Anybody, that would be very good. Functional accessibility, call in app and call apps, close chat, open or close chat. Okay, so command B looks like on my screen is open close chat. Yeah, I don't know what that looks like on your screen, but I would love somebody just to send me a message message of some sort, just to I know that I'm not talking into an abyss here. If anybody could do that, that'll be great. There's a chat window. I'm not sure what you're seeing on your side, but there should be a chat. If you move your mouse over to the left side of the screen on my screen, that's what happens on mine. The little pop-up comes up. And or in fact, I'm happy even if somebody sends me an email. Could somebody just send me an email and say you can hear me before I start and launch into this thing? Let me just see here. Bump inbox. View comment. Okay. Is this the Q&A? Okay. Chennai, thank you. Let's just see what's happening here. I seem to be getting these in my email, but I'm not seeing them in the group chat yet. Why not? I'm not sure. Screen share, that's not what I want. I want to Q&A, maybe. Questions, load in. Aha, all right, I've got, okay, let's refresh. Thank you. So James, Jessica, Genesis, is this a chat room? I can see here. Okay, good, Robert. All right, we're in business. Good, Sonia, thank you. Daniel, Josh, Alexa, all right, good. It's all updating now. So it's great. So if you want to ask questions, then please, this is the place to ask them in the same place. I'll refresh that as I go. I am just going to pop this up here because what I want to do now is screen share. And I want to open up this session, and I'm hoping you'll be able to see that. Screen share, all right. Hoping you can see that. All right. So I'm going to cover some of the things that we spoke about in the exam, and maybe just in this format we can go into them in a slightly different way. I think before I start, though, just to talk about your approach and what you do between now and tomorrow afternoon. And I'm sure you've already done lots of preparation. You've read the cases. And you've got an idea in your mind about how you're going to approach this. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to step back. So you don't do this. Is this the area you're referring to? Okay, cool. I've got it. Josh, thank you. I can see you, and Shingai, and Alexa, and Clay. Okay, all good. So yes, this will be. We can use this as the chat room as well, where I'm getting all the. So there might be other places, but I'm getting all those questions, and I'll use that to answer the questions as well, so I can select them and answer them as we go. So you're welcome to ask questions there. So what I was saying was just in terms of between what you do between now and tomorrow, is take a little bit of time and form for yourself some sort of plan so that you know exactly how you're going to approach this exam. You've got 2.5 hours, and in those 2.5 hours, you need to make an impression and put your best foot forward. So what often happens is people are well prepared and they've got all the pieces that they could do well in the exam, but they actually they don't get themselves organized enough to get a good mark. Okay, so have a plan for yourself, decide how you're going to do some things. So some of the things you've got to figure out is how you're going to manage whatever you bring into the exam in terms of, obviously, you've got the course reader and all the readings from the different cases that we've covered. You might have brought in other readings or other things that you want to maybe refer to or you found are interesting or they're linked to some of the cases. So all those decisions you should make today and tomorrow. So that by the time you get to the exam, you've got a clear picture, you're well organized, and you don't just have a pile of things that you hope you'll get to, but you've already got some ideas in your mind about what documents are there and how you're going to approach it. And make decisions about what are you going to do. Are you going to read through the whole paper before you start? Are you going to make decisions about which questions you're going to start with and which ones you're going to leave? Are you going to make decisions about where you're strongest or where you're not so strong? Are you going to have a plan for each question? So a question plan is pretty good, so that you can basically decide, once I get this question, let me spend a few minutes planning my answer, all right? Now, your answer might end up morphing into something slightly different, and that's perfectly okay. It doesn't lock you into a position. But by thinking about it beforehand and getting a picture in your mind of, this is how I plan to approach this question. So I'm going to write a summary. There's 4 main points that I want to make. These are the 4 points. I need to elaborate on them. And in doing that, however you plan, you write it as a bullet list, or you write a couple of paragraphs for yourself, or you write a mind map, you're giving yourself a structure, and you are then able to measure yourself against it. As I say, it doesn't matter if you change it. So you could decide you're going to do 4 points, but when you're halfway through the third point, or the third key element that you want to make but at least if you go in with a plan, you don't paint yourself into a dead end. And that often happens in these exams because it's quite wide open. You saw that in the midterm, wide open, in that you can start in a question in a particular way, you're not sure where to go, and you're under time pressure, and you have to manage your emotions quite well because you're stressed, and you can get you got so whipped up in the exam that you had panic and left. And this is, not to say it happens to everybody, but it can happen. But you can avoid yourself reasonable expectations about what you're planning to do and how you're planning to do it. So this idea of planning beforehand, you can do some things before you actually walk into the exam. You can plan an approach. I'm sorry, this table is bumping, so probably shaking around a little bit. You can do some things before you get into the exam, but when you're in the exam as well, have a plan for how you're going to do it. It's worth the 5 or 10 minutes that you spend planning to save you time of going down dead ends or getting wrong ideas, or elaborating on points and then realizing actually that you've got the wrong picture, or you're answering something which is not necessarily what has been asked in the question. So that's the first point. I think that's very important that you give yourself a very realistic plan, and it's not really a plan unless you write it down. Okay, so if you've got questions about that, ask me the question in the question forum. I'm looking for those to see if there's any coming up here. Let me just do that and see. It seems to be I have to do that to reload. And there we go. So the last one I've got there is Chana. Okay, so the planning beforehand is very important. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share my screen because I wanted to put up the slideshow which I used on the last day and the last lecture, which some of you would have seen, but I understand not everybody. Not everybody necessarily got to the lecture. All right, so the exam structure, it's pretty straightforward. No electronic equipment, that's important, but it's open book, all right? But only hard copies are permitted. So bring in what you want to bring in. I'm happy for you to bring in other cases that you want to link to. Obviously, these cases, you can have notes written on your cases. You've got to decide what you use. And be careful of being too prescriptive. You might have decided that I'm going to ask a question in a particular way, and you've figured it out, and you write yourself some bullet points of how that looks. If I ask the question exactly that same way, that's perfect, but it's unlikely. It's likely that, in fact, you're going to get asked the question in slightly different ways. And that if that is the case, then you need to adapt your answer and make sure that it matches what's been asked. All right? You can't ask me in terms of marking it to jump to the conclusion. So basically, each one focuses on a particular topic. I'm not sure you can see all of this, but I spoke about these lenses in the 11th lecture and saying that we've looked at a number of different lenses throughout this course. We've looked at cases and we've looked at the lenses of evidence-based, of stakeholders, of high-quality conversations, resource management, culture, and the innovation pipeline. So each of those are lenses through which we've looked at these businesses, and I expect you to be able to use these lenses on any one of the cases. All right, so that's what your preparation should be. You should be able to talk about evidence-based for Elgin Hills, and you should be able to talk about it for Johnson & Johnson and Novartis and any one of the other cases that you've covered in the lectures. So those are the different lenses. I had some slides here which I'm going to go through. What are we looking for you? We're looking for quality, really. I guess that's the sense. So we've given you the matrix that we use in terms of how we're going to mark this, which is how we mark the midterm test. And we're looking for a strong argument. We're basically looking for you to write something which is convincing, that's compelling, and you provide plenty of backup for what you say. And you're not just sucking things out of here. You provide lots of backup, and you use what is given to you, but you can pull from other things as well. Happy for you to do that to make your case. And obviously, if you're pulling from cases which there's no reference to, or I'm not likely to know anything about, for example, or someone else who's marking, one of the tutors marking, is not going to know anything about, you need to substantiate it. Don't just say, well, as per the case that Mintzberg mentioned in Strategy FARI, X, Y, Z. Well, no, you have to be able to quantify it and say this was the case. It was speaking about this company. This was the example that they used, and this is how it links back to what we're talking about here. So, so you need to come across strongly. The quote at the bottom of the page is important. We want you to make strong arguments that aren't clouded by a feeling or an intuition or jumps of logic. They need to be solid and they need to be built up from the facts that have been given to you or the facts that you want to introduce. All right. You've got all these slides. I'm not going to read through this, but the important things here that I just want to draw out is that you need to basically, this was the point about planning. What is it that you're trying to address here? So what's the question that we've asked, or what's the challenge? And you've got to figure that out. And I would figure it out before you start writing. So you can write it in rough, but before you start writing your answer, figure out what am I actually aiming for here? What is the issue that I'm trying to address? And then link your particular approach and the problem that's been asked and the cases and the references that you can link to that. Okay, so the links need to be logical. All right, it doesn't make sense if they're not logical. To make sure that all of them are logical, and then illustrate it in an example. Basically, show some of the fundamentals of a solid argument. I'm not going to spend time on that. Basically, if we look at a question like we've got the example here, using because I explained on the could share, but you don't want to share everything because it might not be relevant to what you're saying. So make sure that what you're answering is in line with the question. And be very clear what the question isn't about. So this one's talking specifically this example question. I'll just emphasize it's an example question. Examine the meta resources, vision, values, leadership in Johnson & Johnson around the time of the tide of poisons. So you've got to frame your answer around that. And often, my tip for you would be that often in the question, there's a very good indication of a structure that you can use. Now, it's not fixed necessarily, but in this one, it would make sense that you would want to have headings of visions, values, culture, leadership, but you would also want to tie them together and not keep them too separate. You want to draw some parallels. And then the question goes on to say, to what extent do you believe that in combination they contribute effectively to the building of a healthy company in the healthcare product sector? So that's your opportunity to tie them together, right? So you can critically examine them. When we say critically examine them, a simple way might be pros and cons, but you might be much more nuanced than that. You could list them on a continuum. You can contrast them with other companies. You can give examples of how they've played out in these cases, but you can contrast them with other cases and to bolster your argument either in the positive or the negative, and then you want to tie them together. So there's lots for you to work there, but often in the question, if you really get to grips with the question, you give yourself a structure for what the answer looks like. And in this one, just the example there, so underlining some of the key points. Meta resources, 4 of them. What period? Well, around the time of the Tylenol poisonings. What's the in combination? So pulling them together, synthesize, integrate, make a whole of these different aspects, make sense, draw some lines that tie them together in some way, or where don't they tie together? Where are they at odds? Where's the culture at odds with the vision of the company? Where are the values supportive of leadership, or where are they not supportive of leadership? All right, so those are all aspects that you can look at. And then moving between the answer and question, what's key here is really that you don't get away with yourself and go off and question, but by the time you've finished answering the question, if you don't have in your mind, as you finish in your answer, a clear view of the question that you've answered and how you've addressed that question, then you potentially have missed the point. So you need to keep in mind what the question is and keep going back to the question. And certainly when you finish, make sure that your answer is in line with your clear view of what the question is. So a lot of this is what I'm saying is really, it's quite logical, but it's about stopping and thinking and being clear about what you're doing. So here's some examples which I did give. Again, I'm not going to read them because you can read them, and these slides are all available for you. in the resources, but it gives you some sample paragraphs, and it spells out for this particular one, the one in italics at the top of the page. It spells out the key dimensions of the culture, right? Remember, from this, it's the one aspect is culture. So it ties the key elements of the culture. It also explains how to influence the way the organization solve problems, and gave an example from the poison. So this is a good answer. It gives you an example of how these things pull together. It's obviously a snippet. It's not an answer in itself. It's just a sample paragraph, and gives you a sense of the type of thing or the type of the nature of what we're looking for in terms of what you wanted to do. Here's another one. And this one, yeah, it's an introduction into some of the meta resources, in this case, vision, culture, leadership, and how they worked in combination. Remember what I said, the integration and synthesis is key. And in this particular case, we link the argument and we give some examples. All right, so those are two samples. So then, what do you need to do? Well, you need to familiarize yourself with all the keys I've mentioned already, the lenses and the cases. Those are the two kind of views that you need to go. And then, although it is open book, you need to be very familiar. This means that you just have a rough idea of the case. You should have summarized the case. You should have your own one-page summary of what are the key points of the case, which, a good way to summarize would be to go through highlight. If you're highlighting coming out to, half of what's in the case is highlighted. So you need to, case. I want to make, I've spoken about these lenses. See, my camera has come on here. I'm not sure why that is, but let's have a look here and see what's happening. And let's see if there are any questions that have come up. So none in the group chat. Q&A. Not sure why. Okay, no screen share, it's fine. Let's have a look. Ask your some questions. So, okay, let's just see what questions we got. Okay, thank you. So I just want to see if I've got the order right. Okay, so I'm going to just answer the questions. Is it in point? So James McCulloch, you said, is there any point including some kind of historical context? Yes, there is. I don't think you should assume. So I think you've got to plan yourself carefully. And what's important is that if you're familiar with the cases, then you can very quickly give the historical context. You don't have to read it out and try and figure out. You should know the historical context because you should know the cases really well. So James, to your question, yes, you should. This is a bit of it. Done questions. Currently answered. Okay, all right. So there we go. Done. Okay, now I see how it works. All right, let me pick this up. Sorry. Okay, Greg Rawburn. So I'm in the Q&A. Hopefully everybody can see the Q&A on the side of the question. This is the question. By comparing the management practice in the two firms, account for the differences in their ability to create and destroy value in the two companies. I'm not sure what you want me to do with that. And I'm seeing here that you asked another question. Hi, can you please explain how you would go about answering this question related to YDE and Elgin Hills for the 2014 paper? Furthermore, what exactly do you mean by management practice? Are you referring to financials, marketing, human resource? Okay. All right, so those are your two questions. So I just want to put those together. Comparing the management practice, account for the differences in their ability to create and destroy value. Okay, so I can't really give you I can verbally tell you how I would go about the approach, Greg, to this question. I can't really rattle off the full answer to it because there'll obviously be nuances in different ways. But so let's just have a look at this. So let's see, what are they saying? By comparing the management practice in the two firms, we're talking about YDE and Elgin Hills. Okay, so you would dig out what are, so again, to what I said earlier, you'd want to say, what are the management practices in YDE and Elgin Hills? So a starting point, and that gives you some structure to the question, all right? So an approach would be to say, let's have a look at what are the management practices in the two firms, all right? And that was your question. So what are the management practices? So we talk about management practices, we're saying, well, what are the ways that they run the firm? Now, we've looked at it through a number of different lenses. So we've spoken about culture and vision and values, and we've spoken about high quality conversations. We've spoken about an innovation pipeline. We've spoken about stakeholder management. So these are all management practices, all right? Some of them we've dived into in a lot of detail. Some of them we've covered in passing. And what we would want you to do is we want to say, well, what are the management practices in the two firms, all right? And let's, exactly by doing that is we'd look for you to firstly give us a good overview of what the management practices are. As you're giving us that good overview of management practices, you could also be contrasting those with other businesses to make a point. It's not the main feature of it. The main feature is the management practices of these firms. But you could say, for example, that YDE is very strong on the ideas, and they generate lots of ideas. And this is similar to another company. And you could give an example of whatever it might be. Southwest Airlines that we mentioned in passing, they're very strong on their ideas for the innovation pipeline. So what we were interested for you to see in your answer is to say, well, you understand what you mean by management practices. So you can list all the things that we've covered, high quality conversation, stakeholder management, innovation pipeline, culture, vision, values, all those different things, and you're able to list them, but then more importantly, you're able to integrate and synthesize them so that you can make arguments about how they relate to creating or destroying value in the two companies. So YDE, when we went through in class, we went through quite a detailed analysis, and we said it's fantastic for many aspects, but there's some aspects which are quite limited. And the question that we grappled with was, the question that we grappled with was, should he have sold or should he have kept the business? Was it on the brink of making huge amounts more money, or had it reached its peak in this era? And that was what we grappled with in the class. So hopefully that gives you some sort of idea of how to go about that. Obviously, within each of those, there would be a lot more detail. Jessica, this is the chat room, so don't worry about the chat room. You can ask your questions here and I will answer them here. So Jessica, do you expect us to show graphs for value chain? Mamo, that's a question from you. You can use graphs, it's up to you. Really what we wanted you to do is want you to communicate well. So how you communicate is important. It's not measured on the on how beautifully you present things, or but it will make a difference if you communicate really well and the graph supports what it is that you argue. If you just show a graph and it's not very well argued, that's not very good, or you argue it very well without a graph, that could be absolutely perfect. That could be a great answer. So there's not a hard and fast to say you need to show graphs for value chain. You can decide whether it's complementary to the answer that you wanted to put out. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm going in the right order. Apologies if I'm going in reverse order. They don't date stamp them. Okay, sorry, Natasha. I realized you didn't see all the slides. The slides I spoke to in the video are all slides that are on Vula already and were covered in the last lecture. So there won't be anything that I've shared here that you haven't seen. I mean, either the last or the 10th lecture was the lenses that I spoke about, but I spoke about that in the last lecture as well. So let's take that question. Natasha, all right, the other questions are all about, I can hear you. Click the image that is third from the right, looks like the puzzle block. Oh, thank you. That's somebody helping to get into the, Matthew helping people to get into the chat room. Is this the chat room as well? We're using this as the chat room. I'm just going to bounce over to the chat room quickly. I don't see anything in the group chat. So I'm presuming you haven't managed to figure it out, and I'm not sure why that is. But I'm going to stick with the questions here. So let's just see what other questions we have. There were one or two more. Is Metacom examinable? Meaning, is there a possibility it will be included as a questionable case study tomorrow? Let me just pop it up there so everybody can see it. Yes, it is there. We discussed it in quite a lot of detail. We looked at it as we did the other cases. So it is possible that it is examinable, but even if it is not included, as with all the cases, I would expect you to contrast things and be able to compare things in the Metacom case. So the video of the lecture that the video of the of Rian van Niekerk's talk is on Vula. It was put up the day of that we spoke about in class, as was some more information about it and my slides. So all of that is there. So yes, it is examinable, and whether, as this with all the cases with Elgin Hills and J&J and Novartis and YDE, even if we don't ask the question specifically on the case, I would expect you to contrast and draw them in. As we did, we brought in, R&B, and we compared it to innovation pipeline, and so we're not on a one-to-one relationship between management practices or thinking about structuring our thoughts about management and the cases. Although we use them to illustrate points, I would expect you to apply any of the approaches to any of the cases. Hopefully that answers your question, Matthew. And then Natasha says, can we assume J&J won't be focused on because of the test? Sorry if that's a sneaky question. You don't need to be sorry. Also, can you please go through a value innovation chain example for one of the cases, Natasha? So no, you can't assume. So there's nothing, sorry, excuse me a minute, there's nothing written off. Talking too much. There's nothing written off. So even if it wasn't a test or asked in the test, it's all examinable all the way through. The test is really just to give you a warm-up and give you a sense of how we go about asking questions. And can you please go through a value innovation chain example for one of the cases? Yeah, give me a sec, because I want to do it visually, and I need to find something to be able to do that. I've just got a link here. Give me 1 second. Innovation for value. Use this one. Let me just have a look. I can again just do it at a high level. I probably can't, I can't really substitute for what we covered in the lectures, because we covered this in quite a lot of detail, but I'm sure you were there. But let's just have a look at what I covered in session 8. What's happening here? How do we invest resources? So very simply, we could take bio oil, for example, which we covered, and I'm gonna just revise that. Let's just cover some of this. So now what I need to do, now I'm hoping that yeah, okay. I'll come back to your question in a minute. Could Zaya see it there? I'm going to just share the screen here, and I am session 8. So my camera should go off, and this should come on. What I don't know is if. So what I'm doing is I'm using the slides from. Okay, so now what I don't know is if I do this. Can someone just pose a question, or using a question, just tell me that you can see me flipping through these slides. Can you see that? Can someone just post that just to tell me? Because then I won't go into full. I think when I go into full screen mode, I actually lose it. But if you can see them, that's what I want to see, because I want to know, so that I know that you are hearing what I'm, or seeing what I'm saying. Somebody who just post that in the questions. Because it seems to be that the questions work, but not the chat. Okay, you got 36 viewers. That's like a quarter of the class. That's great. All right. I don't know. I'm going to carry on and just go blind. Hopefully this works. All right. So where am I? Your screen sharing. Present to everybody. All right. And okay. Innovation value chain. It's all very well, but how do I get it now to? Yes, we can see the slides. Okay, I wish these things were dates then, because it would give me some sort of idea. Okay, that is all very well, but no. All right, I'm just going to do it like that, so you can see the slides. So this innovation value chain is basically, if I seem to move, we'll be looking very good. Now, of course, I can't get it to move. What's happening? Hide participants. I don't want to do that. Why can't I see this? I've got to stop it, try again. Let's go, pump. What if I do the entire screen? Share, and you're probably going to see my screen here. Wow, this is going. Okay, no, that's not very good because it's kind of gone recursively into it, so it doesn't really help. So I have to do that. OAM session 8. Share it. So correct webinar. I don't want that. I want that. So basically, I'm using the slides from session 8. So the innovation value chain is 3 main areas: idea generation, conversion, and diffusion. And it basically lists what happens. And this is Hansen and Birkinshaw 2007 from the reading that we did. So, but very simply, we could look at it in these 3 areas and we'd say, well, some companies are very balanced between idea generation, conversion, and diffusion. Some countries have very little idea generation. They spend a lot of time converting and very little exploitation. And other companies spend little time in idea generation, a bit more time in conversion, and a lot of time in exploitation. All right. So if we think about some examples there, if we just go down here, we think about before Burke and after Burke in what happened with Johnson & Johnson, and you look at Tylenol. So this is Tylenol before the crisis. Then you can see that what they did was they had the same product, but they shifted the product around. And whereas initially the product was marketed because it was a different approach, it was a paracetamol rather than aspirin approach to pain. And paracetamol is a lot easier on our stomach. So it was marketed as gentle. People were wanting something stronger, and the gentle message was at odds with it. So the idea generation, which was the original product, okay, was still stayed much the same, but the conversion shifted because they figured out, and if you go here to what we talk about in terms of conversion, screening, funding, development, all right? So too tight, too loose, systemic, consistent, balanced, not funding, too easy, too tight, unbiased, balanced, development, systemic, stage gating, project, portfolio management, not. So they did a little bit more in conversion, but not a huge amount in conversion to this picture of after Burke. But on the exploitation, it went through the roof because on the exploitation is they basically exploited and they took the product and they created a double strength product. So they came into the market strong, and so they were then able to capture all the people who wanted a stronger pain relief with a brand which was already well known. All right, so they weren't really changing the product too much. They doubled up on the product, they made it stronger, and they got it out into the market. So there was some element of conversion, the actual development and the project and kind of stretching the portfolio a little bit, but the exploitation in terms of focused, getting it out into the market and applying resources in directly related markets or not. So they basically said, well, we know what our markets are. How do we get more product into the market and grow it? That's what they did with after Burke. So you can see a very simple value chain before Burke and after Burke. It moved from being pretty much similar between idea generation, conversion, diffusion, just like the other products. And then they realized that they could do more in the conversion, actually getting it from here out into the market. But then once in the market, they could actually take that a lot further. All right. So I'm going to stop screen sharing there. Natasha, hopefully that gives you an example of how to do it. So in any case, in any of the cases, I would expect you to be able to do a similar, but in more detail and with a stronger argument, and able to say, well, in the ideation stage, this is what they did. In the conversion stage, this is what they did, and in the diffusion or exploitation stage, this is what they did. And comparatively, it was it shifted here or changed there. All right. The next question was Kudzai. So Kudzai asked, is it imperative that we include external sources in answering our questions? Will we be penalized for only including information from the lectures course reader? So it depends how you think about penalized. No, you won't be penalized as in you'll lose marks because you might answer in a very compelling way using only the information in the cases. I think, though, that you give yourself an advantage by intelligently be able to bring in other material. But that doesn't say you have to do it. But it says to me that you have an understanding of the concept, that you're able to bring in another source of material. And it might be one other source, and it might be something that not necessarily a case that you've studied in huge amount of depth, but it might just be a case that you're familiar of, or a business that you're familiar of, and you can draw a parallel. What it says to me is, it says to me that you're able to apply what you've learned in the course in a broader sense. I'm not that interested in you repeating back to me what I've taught you in the course. I want you to come back to me with how you apply what you've learned in the course. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you. I can hear you. With regards to Metacom, with the conversation part of the innovation chain below, because of the poor marketing and a currency which makes such capital-intensive ventures non-attractive. I hope this is sort of clear. I just have to take a minute to understand that. With regards to Metacom, with the conversation part of their innovation chain, which what do you mean by the conversation? Do you mean conversion there, perhaps, Josh? Maybe you can clarify that. I'm going to work on the basis that you do mean conversion part of the innovation chain below, because of the poor marketing and the currency which makes such capital-intensive ventures. Yeah, I wouldn't say low. I think from the conversation we had in class, we concluded that it's probably medium, because they do get out there and they've got some big clients and they've been successful in some of the big clients. We said that they could be doing much more in the exploitation side. And this is what Rian said in his talk to us, was that their marketing wasn't where it should be. So they've got, I mean, great reference clients that had huge success, but they haven't been out, they're not a household name. And in fact, there's other evidence of that in terms of Vodacom, for example, landing contracts, and then only when they can't deliver on the contracts, so they're asking Metacom. The question would be, why aren't Metacom asked first? Why aren't they known for what they do if it is that they are so good at it? So I would say it's more about the exploitation rather than the conversion. If conversion had a type sort of when what's happened. Can refer to other cases where necessary when answering a question. Example, if the question is focused on the J&J reading, can we include some points from other reading? Absolutely. I think I've said that earlier. Yes, you can. Just remember my point about answering the question. Be careful of not waffling off on another case that you know brilliantly. You might know Novartis like the back of your hand, and you've got a very scant understanding of J&J. But if I ask you about J&J, then you need to answer the question around J&J. But you can absolutely point from other readings, if relevant, important, and even points beyond the course. And as I said earlier, so just remember that if you're going to be referencing things from beyond the course, the person who's marking it, or myself, it may have no idea what you're talking about. So you kind of have a little bit of a curse of knowledge. In your head, you might have a very clear picture of how something relates. You're going to have to make that very clear to a person who's reading it for the first time in your answer paper. So be careful of that, of not putting your, not dropping something in and saying, well, as MTN did in Nigeria, X, Y, Z. I don't know what that is, so you need to, and I don't know what you mean by that, because they've done lots of things in Nigeria. So you would need to say, what they did with, the way that they got into the market, or their distribution strategy, which consisted of A, B, C, D. This worked very well, for them to exploit that market. And this is very similar to whatever, J&J did with Tylenol, for example. So Nick, hopefully that gives you an answer to that. I think I did answer it earlier, and I think your question was from earlier. Can we draw innovation value chain describe from that what the company did or should do? Yeah, absolutely. So that's to that picture of the lenses which I put up earlier, over here, not there. Goodness me. What has been shared? Present, stop your screen sharing, stop. The picture. Let's say the different lenses that we're looking through. So you can absolutely draw innovation value chain, describe what the company did or should do using that. So we want you to show how you can apply some of these management structures or management ways of thinking to the different cases. So answer yes is the answer there. Okay, alrighty. I think then I've got all of those. I've got one or two left at the top. Very good. So Greg, you asked, I'm a bit confused as to how you can apply the value innovation chain to R&B, as it mainly revolves around the culture of the organization. Yeah, well, you see, the thing with R&B is that their business, their products are predominantly conceptual, right? So, you know, the case dealt with a lot with aircraft financing, but their products are structured financial products. So this does make it a little bit different to, you know, like bio oil, which has I want to say olive oil, which has tissue oil, which they you know, branded in a particular way and got out into the market. But for value innovation chain to R&D, you would need to think about how much of their business is at the idea stage, how much is at the conversion, and how much is at the exploitation. And the nice thing about their business is that if they hit on a product and they can figure out how to convert it into the market, as in it arrives in the market, and it is a killer product, like people really love it, the exploitation is relatively easy. It's not like they have to go to a factory and manufacture them. It's an approach or a particular way. So like with the competition that they ran at R&B, they used the competition to create ideas, and out of the ideas, our man in point became the winner of the competition. And then, you know, the question to exploit that is relatively easy for R&B. So I would imagine if we just took that little snippet and we said, well, actually, you know, they used the competition to try and generate ideas. The conversion of ideas, we don't have much evidence for. They don't talk about it, but you could talk about it and say that there's huge potential for them to exploit that idea in a particular way. So to say, well, this is our approach to aircraft financing. There's a number of opportunities that R&B have that other companies don't have, because it would be about going to all their existing clients that are already using some other types of products in terms of aircraft financing, and convincing them that this is a superior product, and by doing that, converting them, and that would be in the exploitation stage. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how you could play with it with R&B. I think the interesting thing for me about R&B is that R&B's products are mainly conceptual. You know, they're written up, their descriptions, they're combinations of legal approaches to fit through regulations and to make money for people by understanding those regulations and being able to either, you know, offer financing for capital items or to offer investment opportunities for people to buy into them. So that would be my approach, or some of the thinking, I suppose, in terms of R&B. So for all these cases, it helps you obviously to know the case, but you know, go on the website, have a look and see what are the companies about. Could you describe each of the companies, Elgin Hills and YDE and BioOil and Metacom? Could you describe in a sentence or two or a paragraph what's the core issue with the company? You know, what do they do really well? What do they not do so well? Elgin Hills is great with the white wines, it's terrible with the red wines, you know, was the conclusion we came to in the lecture. Should they even do them? Maybe they should stop doing them, make more sense to them, or they'd make more money by just not doing reds at all. And they seem to be a little bit stayed in their thinking. They keep doing, you know, they're not really doing they're spending huge amounts of time on ideas. So we spend quite a bit of time, and I just want to flag that you need to look at all those different lenses. So we spend quite a bit of time because the questions have revolved around innovation pipeline. But remember, there's also a stakeholder view. So what is the stakeholder view? What are the high quality conversations that have happened? What's going on? You know, what's happened with the vision of the organization, the culture, and the values, and all those things. So, all right. So, is there an ideal structure for the innovation value chain in terms of the size and focus of each of the three stages? So it's a question from Karen. Hi, Karen. No, there's not an ideal structure, other than what we're interested in is, you know, over time, we would expect different businesses, you know, typically a business should start with a fairly robust idea stage, and then it should move down into conversion, and perhaps you don't need too many ideas, but it depends on the business. If it's a tech business and it needs to continually be agile and innovating, well, then there needs to be lots of ideas, and then the culture would need to support it so that there are lots of ideas and it's acceptable for people to fail, and People don't get persecuted for failure, and they have large ownership. So no, I don't think there is an ideal structure. I think the structure is dependent on the age and the stage of the business, what's going on, and how the market is responding to them. So it will be different for every business. What the value of it is, the value of that innovation value chain is that it allows us to understand what's really light on idea. Everybody's doing it. It's not differential. We contrasted it to Yellowtail as a case picture. Very innovative idea. They went after the people who don't yet drink wine, and they in a very successful way, and became a major brand as a result of it. That's strong ideas. Elgin Hill's idea circle is tiny. So the short answer is no, there's not an ideal. And it's more about finding what is the dynamic that's going on in this business at this time, and how does the value chain help us identify what's going on and plan and make suggestions in terms of where we're going to go. All right, and then Matthew, again, I think, asked, would you suggest our answer to questions revolve around the innovation value chain, the 3 phases, and use that as a basis for later? So I think I might have seen this when I answered. No, there's no standard way. Some questions I'm going to guide you towards it or ask you specifically to take a particular approach. If I don't ask you for a particular approach, then you can decide what you can do. But no, the whole exam is not about the innovation value chain. That's just one of the lenses that we look into. I've just mentioned that. So I think that should be pretty clear. And I think at that point, I'm at the end of the questions. So I've really enjoyed that. Thank you. I'm very open to stay around for a few minutes. I did say we'd do this for an hour. It's 25 past nearly 8. If there are any other questions, anything else that occurs to you as we speak, then please pop them up now so that we can, so that I can answer them. And I think I can. I think this goes up onto YouTube immediately afterwards. So once I've done that, I will post the link so that you've got it and you can go over the questions again if need be. What else have we got here? Any other questions? I'm going to hang around for a few minutes. Not too long, because I feel a bit silly staring into a camera. And I think we're kind of hitting the natural end of what we wanted to do here. What is that? Okay, any other questions? Any other questions coming through? I see our viewers are dropping off, gone from 40 down to 33. There we go, a couple of questions. Super. Challenge. Most of the cases that we have read end off with us tell us what the company decided to do. Would it be beneficial to answer to know what they did decide on? i.e. YD did partner with Truworths, for example. It is beneficial, and again, it's probably not so much as in we want to test you to know that you've gone the extra mile and followed up on every case, but more that you've got an approach, or you've thought about in a slightly broader context, and you're not just limiting yourself to what's written in black and white. And what's covered in that particular case. So would it be beneficial? Yes, it would be beneficial to your answer. Do you need to know it? Well, no, I think it's value add that you more importantly would be for you to be able to argue and grapple with. The question we grappled with was, should he sell or should he not sell? Or was it a good time to sell? The fact that he did sell and what's played out since, I think is interesting. I would be interested, for you to have a view and to say, well, this is how Truworths have done with the brand subsequently. It's been good or it's been bad or whatever. So I think that adds again to the general point of you're able to bring in more material than just what we've given you. I think that's useful. So Mama asked, is bio-oil examinable? Everything we've covered is examinable. All right. So I haven't drawn lines around anything and said this is in or not in. The lectures went through, anything we've covered in the lectures is examinable. So I've mentioned, and I've done a few adjuncts where we've gone into other cases, etc. And you'll have a good understanding from what we covered in the lectures. So I wouldn't take anything, don't take anything out, all right? And I mean that from, You may be asked a question on it, but you also, it would be interesting for you to contrast it and to bring it into some of the other answers. The cases have been picked in a way because they illustrate many of the points that we've covered, or to stick with my previous language, any of the lenses through which we've looked at these organizational management issues. Then Chennai says, in the case of BioOil, I'm not quite sure what the main issue that comes out is. A hard one to answer exactly, but I mean, for me, one of the key things about BioOil was the fact that that they bought that company and it had a number of different products, and they made a very hard decision to say, we're going to focus on one of them. And as a result of that one product, they've had tremendous success. We saw the numbers of that. It was significant. And we could look at that through the innovation pipeline or the innovation value chain. We could look at it through stakeholders, and we could understand. So one of the things that BioOil did was that they built their distribution network, and they went international, and they figured out how to distribute the product internationally. But they could only do that because they had a single product. They couldn't do it with what Union Swiss had before, where they had 100 products. There's absolutely no ways they could have penetrated into the market. And then in terms of innovation and ideas, they also came up with the idea that what they should be doing is focusing more on the medicinal aspects than on the beauty aspects. The beauty aspect they found was a difficult place to compete, but it was better for them to compete in the medicinal place. So hopefully that gives you some. Those are the kind of the main threads that ran through it. Your task would then be to look at that through the different structures and approaches that we've spoken about. All right, let's have a look here. Karen's then asked, with YD, the case never mentions whether Simon discussed with other members of the company before selling Truth. Can we assume that this did happen? Example, inquiry, decision-making. Yeah, I think you've got to work with what's given and what you know. And if you can find out more, that's great. If you don't find out, that's fine. You can assume, but then you've got to, they only give us some scant details. He brings his brother in at some point because he realized that he can't run the whole company on his own. So yes, I think you can make some intelligent assumptions and say, this is, I assume this. The important thing with assumptions is always to say the assumption and not to state it as the obvious that he must have, because you don't actually know. So if you're assuming something, and say you're assuming something, and you say it would seem logical that he would discuss this with the other people in the business, as opposed to just saying that he must have, because if we don't know, we don't know. And the cases, in some cases, you are limited. In all cases, in all of the cases, you have to deal with what you've been given, and you have to say what I know, and then what are the things that I assume. Okay, and then Josh asks, with regards to competing resource, could Nevada's resource be capital because the company had so much capital? Third-party firms, yes, they had. So absolutely, capital is a resource. Yeah, absolutely. They had enough capital to pursue an innovative style of management target. Yes, absolutely. So businesses that have lots of money and capital can do things that businesses that don't have capital and have to do things. A reverse logic sometimes, you'd have to decide whether this is the case with Novartis, is that sometimes sometimes the big companies aren't necessarily very innovative because they have so much capital, they're not forced to be innovative. Often it's the people that are having to be really scrimp and save and be very resourceful are the people who are more innovative. So you can make that argument the other way. A lot of money doesn't necessarily equal innovation, which is why a lot of big companies obviously often get overtaken by small companies that then bite into the market because they can move quick and they can do things that the big companies can't do. All right, for RMB, did Bruce get fired? So we've got to work here again with what was in the case. If we don't have an answer to this, then you can't. The case pretty strongly implies that something had to change. Either Bruce changes or he's going to leave the company. Whereas as his boss realizes that this is not sustainable, and he's made some mistakes in how he's brought him on board, and his behavior is negatively impacting the whole culture. You've got to work with what you've got, though. So for me, the conclusion would be Clearly something had to change. Either Bruce had to change, or the company was, or he and the company were going to part ways. It's just on 8:30. I'm happy if there's another question to take it. Otherwise, I'm going to close it and wish you all the best for tomorrow. I hope you have a fantastic exam. Remember what I started with. Please, please, please get your head around what your approach is, right? There's an element of being a little bit strategic to how you write this exam. There are no perfect model answers that you can just regurgitate and write out. I want you to just really urge that. Have an approach and think about it. And often time spent in planning comes back and is worth multiples of that time, rather than running at it hard and thinking that, you don't have time to actually stop and think, and you run into it, and then you realize 3 pages into your answer that you've actually been answering you've answered the question in a wrong way, because you haven't actually planned it and tested some of your ideas. So challenge, great. Thank you everybody, and thanks everybody for joining me this evening. I'll post this up onto Vula. Between Rowan and I, he's better at it than I am actually. We'll keep an eye on the chat forum on Vula, so if there's any last minute questions. I would ask you, please, won't you just fill in the course evaluation. It's a bit late in getting it out, but love you to just share your opinion. What was good, what was bad, what worked, what didn't work. And I really want you to do well tomorrow. I hope you have a fantastic exam. I know it will be a little bit nerve-wracking going into it, but if you've prepared well and you've got a good plan, you will do absolutely fine. Keep your head about you, take a deep breath, and wish you all the best. So thanks very much, and good luck to you all. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Cheers. Bye-bye.